Welcome to another edition of Airsoft Reports. Today, we're going to take a look at the new A&K M249 SAW Para. What you're looking at is the new A&K M249 SAW Para. Now, if it sounds like a mouthful, it is, but most of the time we just call it the SAW. And, of course, those of you who are fans of this particular weapon will know that that stands for Squad Automatic Weapon. Now, there's a lot of really cool stuff on this gun, and we're going to try to get through all of it. We're going to start at the rear and focus on the stock. It's a pretty beefy piece of metal, and there's some features we'd like to show you. One of the really cool things about the Para model is its collapsible stock. We found that this, as you see it now, is the way we used it most frequently, and it does have a small piece of wire which basically gives it a bit more of an ergonomic feel if you're going to be using it to hit targets with precision. Frankly, given what we did with this particular airsoft gun, that is to say suppressing fire and a lot of quick movement, we usually kept it down. We found that sometimes it would get in the way, but we thought it was a thoughtful addition and very cool. It's all metal and it snaps into place very well, and it's quite solid. But what makes the Para model so much different from the other models is the fact that you can collapse this stock down and take off easily 8 to 10 inches. Let's show you what we mean. This whole unit pulls out, rotates, and then slides in place. So you could be carrying this saw almost as a CQB kind of weapon. I mean, as far as light machine gun replicas go, this is going to be one of the most compact models you can find. And these are both metal tubes on both sides. I'm going to pivot it so you can see how it slides onto the lower receiver of the gun. It's a very solid piece, very impressive. It adds a whole heck of a lot of weight to the thing, but it honestly is just it feels very solid. And again, taking it out is just as simple. You're going to want to pull the stock out, rotate it back, and you're back in business. So overall, we liked it, and there's some other features here as far as accessing the gearbox that we're going to show you. So let's get right to it. Now, one of the great features about this A&K M249 is the ability to do a quick spring swap. Now, to get to the spring, you're going to need to get to the back of the gearbox. And to do that, you're going to need to pop the top of the receiver by pushing on these two tabs, which you're going to have to squeeze simultaneously, which then hinge the top portion of the receiver up, just like the real thing actually, and that exposes the top portion of the gearbox. Now, if you'll notice, there's a small tab here, a spring-loaded tab, and this is the tab which holds the spring guide rod and, well, basically it's just the spring guide rod in place. You're going to need to actually utilize this tab and push it towards the front of the gun to disengage the guide rod, and we're going to show you that here in just a sec. Now, one other thing you're going to need to be aware of is the screw, which will allow the rear of the stock to hinge downward. This is the portion which you're going to actually unscrew. We're going to let this receiver kind of just rest. It's not closed, but in order to do this, we need to have both hands. You're going to want to unscrew it. You'll see that it's actually two pieces. The pin pulls out. That's what you should have when you're done. And now we're going to show you how to get at the back of the box. Now, what you're looking at is the rear of the stock that's hinged downward. Remember, we pulled out the pins which held the stock in place here. Now, once you've pulled that pin out, the stock will freely hinge downward. And conveniently, due to the design, once it does hinge downward, you can actually get it to sit upright as you see here without having to hold it at all. Okay, so what you're looking at here is pretty obvious. This is the back of the mech box, and this round piece right here is actually the spring guide rod. So to get at it and to swap it out quickly, you're going to want to put a little bit of pressure on the spring, and then remember that tab we told you about on the top of the mech box. You're actually going to push that, and then the spring guide rod pops out, and as you can see, you've got access to the mech box. Putting it back in is pretty easy. You're just going to push it in until you hear it click, and you're in business. One thing too, we just want to make sure that you understand that the tab, I'm going to show you that right now, the tab on the top, watch the receivers, you just saw it can slam down. If you're not careful, you can hit some fingers. this little tab, you're actually going to be pushing it towards the back, that is to say towards the buttstock when you're applying pressure on the spring guide rod on the inside to remove it the first time. When you put it back in, you just need to put it in, you'll hear it click. There's nothing to worry about on the tab. But that's how you get at the rear of the mech box. We find it incredibly useful. In our opinion, this is really the way most airsoft guns should be going. This is a quick takedown feature. You don't have to spend hours and hours trying to learn how to open up your mech box, worrying about breaking apart, worrying about messing something up on the inside. I mean, sure, you're going to want to get that knowledge at some point. But for those of you who maybe are just starting out in this sport, this is an excellent way to be able to swap out a spring if you want higher rate of fire, perhaps, or if you want higher FPS. The spring swap out feature is really, in our opinion, it's ingenious. So kudos to A&K for utilizing that design. All right, now we're going to move forward, and we've already shown you how the receiver pops up. We're going to show you quickly here where the hop-up adjustment is. Now, accessing the hop-up is a pretty straightforward affair. Remember, once we've already shown you how to open the receiver. It's the two pins to the rear of the receiver, just under the sight, the rear sight. You're going to squeeze those pins, and the receiver hinges up. Now, all the way forward, right basically where the receiver, the top portion of the receiver and the lower portion are attached with the pin, you'll see a small dial, and if you can see there where the pen is pointing, that is your hop-up adjustment. It's actually worked pretty well for us so far. Given that it is so concealed, once you have it adjusted, you really don't have to worry at all about getting bumped or crud in there or anything like that. So that's convenient. We will say though that when you're trying to get it adjusted, it's a little bit awkward, given that you have to hold the receiver up while you're constantly adjusting. It's a heavy gun, so you're going to be doing some juggling. But like I said, once it's done, it holds true pretty well. So overall, we're happy with it. Now we want to focus on the firing portion of this gun. Looking here, you can see the handle, the trigger, and the button safety. It's pretty straightforward. You push it in towards the left side of the gun, and that makes it inoperable to fire. And you'll notice the trigger will not be capable. You won't be able to depress it fully. So that's good. Pushing that safety back out, it is pretty stiff. You can see now that the trigger will travel all the way to the back of the gun, or at least all the way through its range of motion. As far as the trigger goes, we have seen some complaints online, forums, etc. about the trigger pull being too long. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but to be perfectly honest with you, the engagement is pretty crisp. It's basically just a button switch on the inside. So once you find, there's a little creep, maybe 1/4 of an inch of creep, but you can basically stack the trigger and then engage the switch with very minimal force. Some people have suggested putting a small spacer just above the trigger here, which would basically keep it as far back as it can go without tripping that switch. We're fine with it. We never had a problem with overly long trigger travel, so that would be a judgment call on your part. Frankly, we think it's pretty well put together, so we're not really eager to mess with the trigger as it is. Okay, moving along to the handle, this is sort of a novelty on the gun. The real M249 has a chamber in the handle that actually houses some cleaning supplies such as oil and some swabs if you want to use it when swapping out the barrel or if you have some kind of jam. I'm going to tip it over and show you the way it looks on here, so let's do that right now. This is one minor complaint on this gun. It's technically a spring. As you can see, it's pretty flimsy, and that's because we've skirmished with this gun and this has come out popped off, or popped open I should say, and gotten bent. So not a big deal to bend it back, but as far as skirmishes go, it'll probably come out. Now you can see that there's a small chamber in there, and not a bad place to keep an extra Allen wrench maybe, or if you want to keep some silicone gun oil, if you can find a way to store it in there. Kind of a novelty.